All right. Some brothers and sisters have been asking what happened with Dan. Okay. Now I'm just going to pull out one thing. Let's go to Genesis 49. There's a full study we're going to do on Dan, and you'll have that up on the page. Read it.
Genesis chapter 49, verse 16.
Start at the first verse.
Verse 1. And Jacob called unto his sons, and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days.
So he said, gather yourselves together so I can tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Read.
Verse 2. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob.
And hear, ye sons of Jacob. So before Jacob, whose name was turned to Israel, passed, he brought each son to his bedside and told them what will befall them in the last days. All right? Now, through these prophecies, we understand where the children of Israel are today and what prophecies pertains to them. So when others ask us, how do we know who the 12 tribes are? The fathers told us the attributes and prophecies that would befall the Israelites in the last days. It's that simple. And because we understand there's not too many races in this earth. It's a very, when you look at the number of races, it's only a few races in the earth. It's easy to relate Israelite prophecy to the other people. You only have Hamitic people, which are Africans, Asian people, which are Japhetic, and Shemite people, which is all the rest. The Negroes in America, the Indians, the Shemites is white people, Arabs. So it's really three separate families in the earth. It's not hard to figure out who's who when it comes to Ham, Shem, and Japheth. All the lines come out of those three sons. So the only thing we would need to do now is to say, okay, let's look at the prophecies of the last days and see who fits what would bestow them according to prophecy in the last days. It's that simple. The Most High is not going to have his prophecies pertain to any other people than the people he was speaking of. It's that simple. All right? So, when you ask us about Dan, well, what's going on with Dan? What happened with Dan? We're going to give you an insight on what we'll be going into. Read in the 16th verse.
Verse 16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel.
Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Now we know that Dan was not supposed to be in that position. When the 10 tribes fell, which is the northern kingdom, the North American Indians and all those different tribes that came to the Americas, when they fell, Dan set himself up as judges and started doing sacrifices to Moloch and started building temples to Moloch. These are the worships that the Jewish powers are following today. During the time of the Maccabees, the Sabians linked in with the so-called Danites. During the time of the Maccabees, a few years before Christ came on the scene, around 60, 70 years before Christ came on the scene, they were still operating, but they started migrating within the Idumeans, which are Edomites. We're going to go into that history very soon. But we're going to give you a tidbit of what we're going to go into, or what we will show in the future. Read.
Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel.
Go ahead.
And Dan shall be a serpent by the way.
He shall be a serpent by the way. A serpent links directly to the devil, to show you that Dan would eventually start operating with Satan. Read.
An adder in the path.
And an adder in the path. An adder is a poisonous snake. That means he would be in the way of us receiving our salvation. That eventually Dan will fit in future prophecy, predominantly in future prophecy, as the tribe that would actually go against his brethren. Read.
That biteth the horse heels, so that the rider shall fall backward.
So that the rider shall fall backward. So he was put in. He ended up turning and going against the 12 tribes to make us fall backward. So he joined league with the Romans and the Idumeans. But before that, he started a priesthood in the northern kingdom and started dealing directly with Moloch and child sacrifice. And we're going to prove that. Now, as we read in Genesis 49 and understand that according to the Bible, the Most High said he put his spirit in Jacob to tell his sons what will befall them in the last days. Also, there's a record that they did not Canaanize in the Bible. He went into further detail with each of his sons. And it's in a book called The 12 Patriarchs. So when you read Genesis 49, it actually, Genesis is a microcosm of what the Most High showed in the 12 patriarchs. He actually go into deeper detail of what he told each son along his bedside. So each tribe has a record. Each patriarch have a record. It's called the 12 patriarchs. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read the end of the book of Dan to show you further information that was showed to Dan and what would befall him in the last days. So we'll know where Dan stands today. I need you to read right here the chapter, the Testament of Dan, the 7th chapter. And I need you to read this paragraph right here, starting with depart.
Depart therefore from all unrighteousness, and cleave unto the teacher by his works, the law of the Most High.
No.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. And cleave unto the righteousness.
And cleave unto the righteousness of the Most High, and your race will be saved forever.
So it says, depart therefore from all unrighteousness and cleave unto the righteousness of the Most High. That's the law. And your race will be saved forever. Read. So that the law is what saves us. The law is our righteousness. Read.
And bury me near my fathers.
And then Jacob told Dan, you all need to bury me near my fathers. Read.
And when he had said these things, he kissed them, and fell asleep at a good old age. And his sons buried him. After that, they carried up his bones and placed them near Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Nevertheless, Dan prophesied unto them that they should forget their God, and should be alienated from the land of their inheritance.
What did he tell Dan?
Nevertheless, Dan prophesied unto them that they should forget their God,
That they should forget their God, read,
and should be alienated from the land of their inheritance.
and they shall be alienated from the land of their inheritance, read,
And from the race of Israel.
and from what?
And from the race of Israel.
And from what?
And from the race of Israel.
And from the race of Israel, read,
And from the family of their seed.
and from the family of their seed. So when you go into Revelation 7, you see 12 tribes excluding Dan. Because Dan now have been alienated from Israel. And it says, and from the family of their seed. He's no longer linked in as a family member of the 12 tribes. Any existence of Dan in the earth is strictly Gentile now. It's strictly Gentile. They end up mixing with the Idumeans and merging their seed with the Idumeans and the Romans and coming against Israel and started a network of teachings or powers of worship to go against the children of Israel and the teachers in Christ. So now they've been alienated and they're no longer a part of the race of Israel. So you don't see it. You don't see in Revelation 7, 12,000 of Dan, because Dan was used to help destroy the children of Israel. Who took Dan's place? When Dan fell, Levi, who was scattered throughout each suburb, now became a tribe. No longer would they be the priests, they became a tribe of Israel, and they took Dan's place. All right? Again, when you have the information, you don't have to deal with your own opinion. The information brings forth truth. All right? But we'll do a full lesson on what Dan went into to fulfill this prophecy here. All right? So these books I go into here is the Apocrypha books, but they're Apocrypha books that the Catholic Church, Old Testament Apocrypha books that the Catholic Church did not allow our people to receive. And this, again, came out of Oxford University. So colleges out there have our information. All right? I had to show that. Last but not least, give me the scriptures in Maccabees real quick, out of the Apocrypha, that based on the Feast of Dedication. You have it? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, some might ask, when it comes to holy days, how must we deal with the Feast of Dedication, which is in the scriptures? All right? Now, when it comes to certain holy days, especially holy days like this, what we suggest is for you to treat these days as a Sabbath, as far as a holy day in the Bible, and use it as an holy convocation to come together. All right? You got the chapter and verse? Okay. The holy day of the Feast of Dedications started, I think, the 29th, sundown. It was the 29th or 30th?
The 30th.
The 30th, excuse me, sundown. Okay, so you count the 30th sundown, and from this 30th, which was last month, up until the 8th of this month, which is the 8th of December. The 7th of December, excuse me, I'm one day off here. But to let you know what the Feast of Dedication is, this is so you can read it and understand it, what the Jewish people call Hanukkah. All right? Now, what they're dealing with is straight Satanism, and it have nothing to do with the scriptural holy day. This is really a Jewish Christmas. That's all it is. It's part of their merchandise. They took the last quarter of a year to round off their fiscal calendar, and they made it where it would be about buying product and giving gifts at the end of the year in worship of them giving gifts to Moloch. So Hanukkah is no different than Christmas under them. There's no place in the scriptures that tell us that on the Feast of Dedication or the Feast of Lights that we're supposed to give gifts to each other. That's no place in the scriptures. All right? So we need to get up out of that whole mentality of the giving gifts at a certain time of year. It's straight Moloch worship. It has an origin, and it's satanic. All right? Now again, to show you the total evil that comes from the Judaic Kabbalah doctrine, these people that are running the world and controlling the banks and controlling the money and own Hollywood claim to be Jews, but yet they're the people that finance the commerce and merchandise buying all over the earth. They're the people that have orchestrated your Christmas ideology. They gave you that. They gave you your Christmas and spending. Now, they're supposed to be Jews that don't believe in Christ, but yet they push Christmas. It's their television. They control the media. They're putting you into the spirit. Why? The Christmas spirit is no different than the satanic spirit they're dealing with. It's all the same. Read.
1 Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 41.
Go ahead. 1 Maccabees 4 and 41 in the Apocrypha.
Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortresses until he had cleansed the sanctuary.
Go ahead.
So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place.
So to give you a picture of what's going on here, Judas Maccabeans, the Maccabean brothers, had a decree from the Most High to rebuild the temple. But before that, they had to war with the Gentiles who defiled the temple. They had to war with the Gentiles, and then they had to rebuild and tear down all the gods that were set up within the temple. Now, since we fell, can you imagine all the gods that's in the temples now? Herod the Great, or Herod the satanic devil worshiper. He's nothing great about him. He went into the temple after Judas Maccabees and the brother Maccabees set it up and started the same witchcraft and evil that was put before the Maccabees. Why did Judas Maccabees and the brothers had to do this? Because you had Dan, you had the Idumeans, you had these other Gentiles who defiled the temple to the point where we, over and over, here it is, the Most High have to decree us to build the temple and build the temple. So when Christ came and was crucified, he split the temple in two. So now the temple is the heavenly tabernacle where the throne is. And he says the temple is now us. It's in us now. There's no building in which we can call the temple of the Most High in this earth. Therefore, again, if someone is out there waiting for a temple to be built in Israel and think that's part of prophecy, they are totally distorted. There's no scripture anywhere that says there's going to be another temple built in Jerusalem, and we need to look at that as prophecy. They have defiled the temple since we fell in 70 AD, and that temple is still defiled. Why? Because Christ did not come to set up the temple. So if you want to know what's going on over in Israel, just look at history and how the temple was destroyed before. It's the same thing. There's nothing new under the sun. Read.
Verse 46. And laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hollowed the courts. They made also a holy vessel, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, and the altar of burnt offerings, and of incense, and the table. And upon the altar they burnt incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple.
So back then, brothers and sisters, the temple had a candlestick. Why? Because at that time there was no such thing as light switches, and there was no such thing as light bulbs. So the candlestick actually had an actual purpose to light a room. And I'm saying this because some brothers and sisters out there think that the menorah is something they should have in their house as a representation of being Israel. You have a light switch in your house. You don't know the Babylonian connection to the menorah. Do your research. These things were idols to the Gentiles. So some people might look at this and say, see, that's the menorah. The menorah had a purpose in old time. They didn't have light bulbs. So they needed to light it for the ceremony to light up the room. That's common sense. Read.
Verse 51. Furthermore, they set loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the month of the 9th month.
On the what?
Now on the 25th day of the 9th month.
On the 25th day of the 9th month. What day is this? This is December 25th. This is December 25th. Really, December is the 9th month. It's not the 12th month. Now you see how they have holidays linked in based on specific days. Read.
Which is called the month Caslu.
Which is called the month Caslu. Read.
In the 148th year they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the altar of burnt offerings.
So they started doing their sacrificing again. Mind you, this is before Christ came into the earth. They were still setting up their sacrifices. This is the Maccabees. Read.
Which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that it was dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
They kept the dedication of the altar 8 days. And that's where you get your so-called Hanukkah from. Now what the Jewish people do, they'll take a menorah and light a candle for each day of Hanukkah and give gifts during those 8 days. Where did they get this giving gifts from? It's a satanic ritual. Because their gifts first start with sacrifices. These sacrifices that was animal sacrifices under the Maccabees, that was before Christ. But these people out there over in Israel require human sacrifices. While they're doing their 8-day candle worshiping and while people are giving gifts to Moloch. Read.
And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the altar of the and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their seasons from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness. At that time also they builded up the Mount Zion with high walls, and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down, as they had done before. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortify Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea.
Against who?
Against Idumea.
So we set up a fence against Idumea. Idumea is a Greek word for Edom. Why? Because they helped defile the temple before. They came and destroyed us under Antiochus Epiphanes. After Alexander the Great, you had Antiochus Epiphanes, who actually laid the groundwork for the desolation of abomination. He was satanic. He gave this world the blueprint on how to destroy the children of Israel within the earth. And each government have been using that blueprint ever since. So if you want to know about the holy days, that's a holy day there. All right? The 9th month and the 25th day from the new moon, which was November 30th. Okay? So it's not about giving gifts. It's not about any of that. It's a dedication of the temple. But 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of the Most High, and the Most High dwell within you?" So if anything, it should be a cleansing of our temple. It should be a work towards a cleansing within our temple and dedicate our temple to the Most High, because we are the temple of the Most High now. It's not about the ritualistic practices that was in the Old Testament, because the sacrifice is done away with. And when Christ was crucified, the temple rent in two. All right? Now on our webpage, you'll have the holy days. There's a calendar for the holy days. And the holy days have been set for the whole year, including next year. So you can go to the calendar and just click on the day and it'll come up for each holy day. Well, they'll be on there. Yeah, they'll be on there. We have them all sketched out, but they will put it on the calendar. Lawyer, you're going to put it on the calendar, right? Mm-hmm. So you have no problem. And let's do this. On the calendar, let's make sure we type in Holy Convocation. Holy Convocation means to come together. That way on the calendar, you'll know what day in advance to come together with people of like mind in your regions and in your area. Okay? So you got that?
Mm-hmm.
All right.